Welcome to week 3. Sorry for the confusion. We are going to be going over the corrected discussion assignment, which hopefully will be a little bit clearer to you here. We're talking about socialization, okay? Socialization is a key concept. It's one of the baseline concepts in sociology, okay? There's this big debate about nature versus nurture, okay? And, there's a tension between our kind of biological heritage and our, the way we're socialized, how we take the world in, from infancy. So much that it's very hard to disentangle the two. We do know, though, that without interaction from other humans as an infant, we would be in really bad shape. There are a number of cases. The story of Jeannie, the wild child, Anna. There are a number of examples of this in your book, of children that were raised in rather tragic circumstances, and they've lived in social isolation from a real age, and they get what pediatric psychiatrists call environmental kind of autism. It's called, is the term. Okay, so socialization is the process of learning, internalizing everything you need to know to be a human. Not just values, beliefs, and norms, but practical knowledge, language. How do you manipulate the world? You do it through language, first of all. Okay? And we do this via agents of socialization. The first, most important one, of course, is our family. Then the first thing that happens is we go to school and we work in a bureaucracy, for the first time ever when we're in the kindergarten or first grade. We're there in a place where the rules are not made specifically for us, but for everybody. And students kind of learn this authority, via kind of a hidden curriculum. Sometimes if people are socialized to with very problematic norms, we can talk about resocialization, right? And that is the process where, the process whereby you're completely broken down and rebuilt. Like, for example, people who in the military in a boot camp. And then a lot of the tension in sociology and socialization kind of draws a focus on this from the time we're born throughout our entire lives, has to do with social agency, the ability of the individual to act freely and independently. When we talk about sociological social psychology, then, what we're talking about is the self, an individual's conscious, reflexive experience of a personal identity separate and distinct from other individuals. We don't really talk about these Freudian or Jungian concepts as much as we talk about the work of George Herbert Mead and Charles Horton Cooley. The idea, and you'll be talking about this in your discussion, the looking glass self, is the notion that the self develops through our perception of others' evaluations and appraisals of us. So what does that mean? Well, depending on how important someone is to you, your parents, for example, you're going to develop a perception of what other people think of you. You do it sometimes in limited ways with teachers, right? You try to anticipate what the teacher's going to test you on, for example. And then George Herbert Mead held that humans develop through these 4 stages, right? First, we mimic other people. We imitate them when we're like 3 to 5 years of age, and then we go into the play stage, okay, where we pretend, and then ultimately, as we grow to the game stage, the 3rd stage of Mises' theory of the development of self, wherein children play organized games. They take on the perspective of the generalized other. They try to anticipate what another team is going to do, competitors or teammates. So the generalized other, then, is the perspectives and expectations of a network of others that a child learns and then takes into account when shaping his or her own behavior. We experience the world, according to George Herbert Mead, in terms of a subject and an object, the I and the me. In the mid-20th century, Irving Goffman talked about impression management, how we construct our social world as adults. Okay? He talked about the effort to control the impressions we make on others so that they form a desired view of us and the situation. This is an extension of the looking glass self. And Irving Goffman, basically, he said life was kind of like analogous to a theatrical performance. We have a front, that is, I'm presenting an electronic front to you now. That helps define the definition of the situation. We have props, we have a costume, we have appearance, right? The context or setting in which the performance takes place is a region. And the backstage is where you can drop your role performance a little bit. You can relax it. Okay? We have public and private performances, as it were. So the self is socially constructed. The process, it's a social construction, the process of which a concept of practice is created and maintained by participants who collectively agree that it exists. For example, a classroom, an online classroom, is a social construction. Do we have multiple selves? According to sociological social psychology, the answer is a resounding yes, we do. We don't delve into what your true self is. Now, there are elements of one's personality that are more or less baked in, from this early critical point as a child, and later, later we develop ourselves according to the setting in which we find ourselves. Are we at work? Are we with friends? Are we with our loved one? Are we with our family? And it's influenced by identities such as race, sex, class, sexuality, region, and age. We talk about we position ourselves socially in comparison to others via a concept that we call in sociology a status. A status is a position in a social hierarchy. It carries a particular set of expectations. Okay? You are a student. The expectations are that you perform a role. That would be role behavior. Okay? Then we think also of a scribe status, usually something that's difficult or impossible to change, like our gender, and achieve status. We can earn it through individual effort or efforts imposed by others. Now, with each status comes a set of behaviors expected of someone because of his or her status. Let's talk about, for example, the way we look at roles a bit. Your status as a student is not the only status you have. You may be a worker and a family member, okay? But let's say for the sake of this example that you're looking at your two statuses as a student and worker. Role conflict is going to be experienced when we occupy two or more roles with contradictory expectations. You get called into work, but you have a final exam, for example. Role strain, on the other hand, is a tension experienced when there are contradictory expectations within one role. This usually happens with students during the midterms or finals. And finally, role-taking emotions. We think of emotions as quintessentially like embodied, but they're not necessarily. Emotions like sympathy, embarrassment, shame, guilt require that we assume the perspective of another person or many other people and respond from that person's point of view. So emotions are quintessential social construction. They're feeling rules around emotions. They're norms or rules regarding the expression and display of emotions. Expectations about the acceptable or desirable feelings in a given situation. Finally, emotion work or emotional labor, the process of evoking, suppressing, or otherwise managing feelings to create a publicly observable display of emotion. So, these are the concepts associated with the socialization process, both as we are born and as we move into adolescence and throughout the rest of our lives. Please read. Let's go back now and take a look at the assignment. Okay. I'll be posting this in a moment here. Okay, module. I've rewritten this assignment. Hopefully it makes a little more sense. So, for this discussion assignment, review the terms in bold found in the readings this week. That's the reading from the chapter on socialization. Prompt, and you get 3 prompts. Respond to each of these prompts, please. Write a paragraph. Define socialization and the influence of agents of socialization. Describe ways in which men and women are socialized similarly and differently. And then, based on your reading of Chapter 3, describe the looking glass self and the generalized other. Great. We will see you in Chapter 4.